You are tuned into the Power Chord Hour right here on 107.9 WRFA, as well as the Power Chord Hour podcast. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for watching on YouTube. However you're checking this out, I'm very happy to be back with you. I'm your host, Anthony Merchant, and this week we have with us Doug Gillard, probably best known of Guided by Voices, formerly also of Nada Surf, and tons of other amazing bands, one which we're going to talk about today, which I'm really excited for because it's not a band of Doug's that I really got to check out until recently, but not a new band, though. It is Children's Crusade, his band from the 80s, which they'll have their 1984 demo, A Duty Dance with Death. That's going to be reissued here on Robert Pollard's record label, Splendid Research, coming out November 15th. So very shortly after this comes out. So I'm very excited to talk about this with Doug. We'll get into some old music and some new music, I'm sure, too. But Doug, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Anthony. Appreciate it.
No, I'm looking forward to this. I mean, I'm sure that most of the time you're talking about like Guided by Voices or Not a Surf, but we're gonna get into like quite an old band here, which again I'm like new to, but I'm really liking what I hear so far. So like let's get into this in the grand scheme of things for you. I know you've been in tons of bands. Where does Children's Crusade kind of fall? Was this your first band? Did anything kind of come before this? Like where's this kind of fall?
It was one of the first projects I had. I'd say, I mean, we were still in high school when this happened, and we had formed a sort of a band, practice bedroom band, and we wanted to play out before that, a couple years before that. Fraser, who sings on Children's Crusade, and the drummer Sean Saley and myself were all in the same town, and we sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say new wave, but it was sort of, we were called Burning Theater, and it was along the lines of what Children's Crusade ended up sounding like. And we were into, The Fall, Joy Division, Susie and the Banshees, Killing Joke, things that we were just getting into then. And this would probably be about 81, 82. And then we morphed into a hardcore band, Starvation Army, and those guys stayed with that, and I didn't. But a couple years later, Fraser and I kind of reconvened, and he was always a great lyric writer. So I can't remember if I'd still had some of his stories and lyrics, or if he gave me some fresh ones. But we decided to go record this project when we were seniors, like the second half of senior year of high school. And let's see, before that, during that time, I joined another band of older guys, more of a punk band called Suspect Device. And we were actually playing out in Cleveland, playing in clubs and stuff. And since those guys had stayed in Starvation Army, they had started playing out too. And we were still not really of age. Well, by this point, by 84, we were 18, so we were then of age. So, and Sean Saley went on to, he was in some more Cleveland bands, and he went on to drum for Government Issue and other things, and moved to the DC area, and he's still active. And he's a really great musician. But so Fraser and I did this project, and we did something else the next year, which would be 1985, that actually got released again posthumously. That didn't come out when it was recorded, although the one we're talking about now did come out as a cassette release right after we recorded it. So it was always sort of muddy sounding and a little hissy sounding from the get-go. Even though it was pretty well recorded, it was in a real studio, with real tapes, engineer, and everything. So I'm glad I had the chance to remix this stuff, and so you can kind of hear things a little clearer.
I know it's like very cliche to ask, but I mean, this came out in 1984, so we're looking at the, I guess, 40th anniversary. Does it feel like it's been that long? I mean, because again, you've done so much too, so it's not like I'm talking to a guy who like put a demo out in his teens and never did anything again. There's a lot of stuff in between here, but I mean, when you're looking back, does it feel like it's been 40 years for something like this?
It does. Yeah. Yeah, I've been through the ringer, but no, but I mean, anything you come back to that you remember doing, it sort of seems like just like yesterday. I mean, I think that goes for anything, but there are a lot of things I don't remember about it. I remember recording it. I don't remember like the brand of drum kit that the guy had in the studio that I played, for instance, or the equipment or the gear or anything. And it was this little project studio in Elyria, Ohio, was where we lived and where we did this. And it was sort of a little studio that was a converted garage, pretty much. Although they had some pretty pro gear, and Steve, the engineer who recorded it, was very professional and very experienced. So it does seem like a long time, and getting into the mixing of the individual tracks, it was there were some things I didn't remember doing, which was pretty fun to find out about, you know. And Travis and I were mixing this stuff.
When was kind of the last time you had listened to? I mean, was this something that you hadn't listened to since almost 40 years ago? Or I mean, is this, you know, how long had it been?
Well, since the cassette was out, and I had a master cassette, and then I had this double cassette deck that I would you know, copy it off every time someone wanted one. I mean, that's not exactly true. I think there was a service in Cleveland, A to Z Audio or something like that I would take maybe they made a master cassette of these reels. I can't remember, but and they made 50 or 100 copies initially. And as time went on, I just started dubbing them off myself. But and that doesn't mean there were many made at all. I mean, it's not many people have this thing. Maybe 100, I don't know.
Jeez.
Maybe 50 out there. I don't know if any are still out there. And it was just a little cassette release. I bought a sheet of stickers to put on it and rubber stamps with the band name and A and B and this wedding gothic, you know, font, and folded the cardboard sleeves to make a jacket, you know. But yeah, it wasn't very there wasn't much involved with that. One track came out the next year on a compilation in Cleveland called "They Pelted Us with Rocks and Garbage." And by that time, I was in this other band called Death of Samantha, which went on to be Cobra Verde later after 1990. But Death of Samantha was a popular band in the late 80s. We signed to Homestead Records, which was Gerard Cosloy's, well, he was an A&R person for the label. It wasn't his label, but New York label. And we formed in Cleveland really in 84, right after I did this Children's Crusade thing. So anyway, this compilation came out with one of these songs on it. Lurker on the Threshold was on it. And My Dad Is Dead happened to be on that compilation as well, which was a band that Mark Edwards, the leader, continued for a while after that. Did I stray away from the initial question?
No, I like this. I mean, it kind of still goes into it. I think you answered the question, but I like where you're going. You're kind of what's going off of after this. Because also, I didn't realize this, by the way you're talking about it, was Children's Crusade just a band for like a year? Was this only like a year-long project? It doesn't sound like the life of it was very long.
Well, you're correct on that. We recorded this, and it was just going to be a recording project. And Fraser, who did the vocals and lyrics, left for the Army the next day.
Oh, geez!
After recording, he didn't stay long there. He was in Texas for some months, and then left that, and came back to Cleveland. But then we reconvened the next year. He was still in Starvation Army, but we actually took some photos, some Children's Crusade photos, and started playing out live. So combining this stuff and the newer stuff that we did in '85. We did a few shows. We opened for Swans once.
Oh, nice.
Just a few shows around Cleveland. It was never a super serious project. It wasn't, it was something cool to do, something fun to do.
You never thought it would be more than that, though, by the sounds of it either. It doesn't sound like you didn't go into it thinking this was going to be like a touring band or anything like that. You always kind of knew it was just going to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I should have set my sights on it a little more seriously, but no, I think we just were involved in so many side projects and other things that this was something cool. We thought was cool to do and was fun for what it was, and I don't know.
Well, how about getting this reissue? I mean, I'm excited to see it come out. Obviously, again, it's coming out on Robert Pollard's label, Splendid Research, but the idea of doing this, where does that come from? Was this an idea you were kicking around? Was it something he brought up? Where does the idea to even kind of, reissue this thing kind of come about originally?
During the pandemic, the members of Guided by Voices got together we started compiling rarities and things, and mostly Guided by Voices centric live recordings. Bob offered up some demos and as a subscription service to our fans, so they could still have some things coming down the pike, and also we could make a little bit of income from that because there weren't any shows for a couple of years, as you know. And each band member had their own week as well of whatever solo things they'd done in their lives and this and that. And I had a couple weeks dedicated to my stuff. I threw in some Children's Crusade in there too. And but I also think that Bob he'd had this cassette as well for a while. I can't remember if I gave him one years and years ago in the 90s, or if he got it somehow through some other means. But well, who knows? They were on Scat for a little bit, and Scat was the label that did a posthumous record of Children's Crusade from '85. So released that in 1990. So the Robert from Scat may have given that to Bob, but in any case, Bob had the stuff. He liked it, and he just said sometime last year, what if you wanted to reissue that Children's Crusade stuff on my new label? I said, that'd be great to have the master tapes. I've got to really see what's involved in getting them baked and see if I can remix this stuff. So I looked into it, and it was possible, and we got it done. So it took Bob to bring it up to me to really get that ball rolling, but
I'm happy he did. Again, I like what I've heard so far. What would, I know you said some of the details of Children's Crusade, or I don't know, maybe a little blurry or whatever, but what did songwriting kind of look like on this project? How did the songs kind of get written? How did that process go? If you recall that much?
That's what I don't recall. I remember Fraser had the lyrics on yellow legal sheets, but I don't know if I looked at the lyrics and wrote the songs or what, but I made up a bunch of instrumentals, and I wrote the musical part of it, all the music, and just kind of wrote it on guitar. And I don't know if we got together to play through the stuff or not. I really don't know. I don't know if I gave Fraser cassette demos of these instrumentals or what. I really don't remember how it came together. Matching the lyrics of the songs or anything. That's something that escapes me completely.
I mean, no, I don't think anyone can fault you. You've made a lot of records since then. I mean, again, we're going back 40 years as well. So yeah, I can't fault you if the details there are a little, they're a tad bit blurry.
Well, there's some other things I remember from around that time, things I made up for Death Samantha, or
They're a little more clear.
I Am a Tree was around 91. I remember making that one up in the apartment that I had. But yeah, for some reason, we also had high school going on.
Oh yeah, I can't believe that's the other thing. Thinking about this is that you're a high school band as well. I mean, the fact that you were still, you said, a senior while doing this. Yeah,
we weren't really a band, but we weren't really a band yet at that time. But we were getting this together.
I don't know if this is too specific, but I mean, do you consider, maybe it doesn't matter at all, this more a band or a project? Because I know you said project a couple times. I mean, do you view it in one way? Is there a difference?
Not really.
No. I feel like I interchange them too. I interchange the words, but it's like, I don't know if one kind of meant anything different to you. But
in a way they kind of do. But in this case, I mean, I guess it's a band. It's basically just Fraser and I, and we've never had any set other members as far as playing out.
That actually kind of goes into my question with, like, you guys being a duo and writing as a duo, like for you and in this band, and I don't know about other bands you've been in, if there's any other like duos in there for you, but like when you're writing and you're doing a band with only one other person, does that make it easier or harder to convey creative ideas than you are in, say, a band with like 5 people? Like, does having less people to have to, kind of talk through or even the other side to go, hey, I just don't love your idea. Like, does that make it easier or harder when there's only one other person versus, 3 or 4 other members to, kind of have that process with?
That is a really great question. And I think it's easier.
Makes it easier?
Yeah, I think it makes it easier.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah. In the case of Children's Crusade, Fraser was a writer and frontman / singer. And he didn't play anything. And he didn't really, there was no opposition to any opinions or any ideas.
There wasn't a lot of fun, have to argue.
He liked this stuff. I liked his lyrics as intact as they were, and we just kind of put them together. So there wasn't really any hashing out of anything. And like I said, I don't remember. We must have gotten together and at someone's house and kind of went through the stuff, and talked about it, but. Or maybe it was on the phone. I don't know. I mean, we lived in the same town, so not far away. So I don't think there was a lot of phone conversations. But, I mean, because I know that we sort of agreed on some concepts for I mean, there's only 8 songs, but for some of the songs, in direction-wise, we agreed on the fact that, okay, this one I envisioned sounding like the band Chrome. And so that was the song Man Gun, the second song on the record. The Guardian was my stab at, I was really getting into Cocteau Twins at the time. And so I did something really sort of more glassy guitar and that. And there was one, the first song, the second side, Operate / Art Student, was the first part is more of a spoken word sort of a thing that was influenced by Birthday Party. And so I know we talked about that because you can hear Fraser sort of doing his sort of his version of Nick Cave and that. And then it goes into this song Art Student, and that was sort of Killing Joke-ish. And so you can hear us both sort of offering up our version of what we thought that would look like. So that tells me that we did talk about the concepts on this a little bit.
With like, I kind of want to talk about too, I can't remember where you said you guys were first located, but I mean, you weren't far out of Cleveland, right? I mean, were you in like a Cleveland suburb or somewhat near there?
Yeah, Elyria. So it's about 20, 30 miles west of Cleveland.
Okay, so okay, then it does work with that. I was gonna ask, like, the kind of local music scene, like what was going on at that time, like paint a little bit of a picture of that for, you know, I guess around 1984, but really mid 80s. You know, what did that look like? I mean, was there anyone kind of doing what you guys were doing? Were there bands? I know you said you didn't play much, but I mean, you know, there were kind of bands to go play with, venues to play at. How did that kind of look in the mid 80s?
There were lots of venues in Cleveland that were receptive to very underground things. The other band I was in, Suspect Device, played at this place called the Pop Shop underneath the Agora sometimes. We opened up for Easter Monkeys, who had future members of Perubu in them, and Easter Monkeys was kind of a legendary, great underground band. Mike Hudson from the Pagans' sister was the drummer of that band, and they were still around in the early 80s. There were very commercial new wave-ish bands existing in Cleveland at the time. And then you had some punk bands. You had the hardcore scene just starting to happen, actually. The Pagans were still around. We were just coming of age so that we could actually get into the clubs to see some of these things, actually. And so we hadn't seen too many shows. Although that band I was in, Suspect Device, had played shows in Cleveland in 83 and 84, and I was underage and no one really checked. So that's how it happened then. I mean, like the year 84, Death Samantha opened for Gun Club, and
oh, nice.
We opened for Replacements in Kent. And
oh, you played with the Replacements?
Yeah, it was their Let It Be tour. So it was about October, November. October, November of that year in Kent, Ohio, JB's. Yeah.
Oh my God, they're my all-time favorite band. That's amazing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was quite a show. Was
it an on night or was it an off night? I know with them, I never got the chance to see them, but what kind of night was that, if you recall, for them?
It was, it was a great show, and then drunken napkin request things. Bob Simpson was wearing a cardboard box as a tutu, They were, they got in their cups, but they were having a good time. They did covers like Yes Roundabout, things like that. There was someone had a dorm party later that night, and Tommy was there, still he had his tartan suit on, I think, still. Yeah, and those guys said they liked us. I mean, Paul and Bob did it anyway. And I think we played with them one other time, but I don't remember the show. John Pekovic says that we did, but I'm not sure. But yeah, there was a pretty good Cleveland club scene, and really good college radio stations.
Oh yeah, that is the time for it too. College rock and college radio. That is the era of it.
And Fraser and I listened to a lot of college radio. So we lived near Oberlin, and that was a good station. I actually was at a show there that year. You didn't have to be a student, so I was still in high school, and I had a show at Oberlin at OBC. And I don't know if you know the musician Chris Brokaw.
No.
From Boston, guitarist. He was in Calm and Codeine and other things. He's been doing a lot of solo things since. He played in Thurston's solo band. I met him that year. He was a couple years older than me, but he was a student at Oberlin. He also had a radio show there. But anyway, there was Cleveland State, Case Western Reserve University. They had great college radio stations. Even John Carroll and Baldwin Wallace and Berea, they all had stations. And so you could just tune in left of the dial and to 4 or 5 stations sometimes and get an education, because they weren't stuff they weren't playing on commercial radio over here yet.
That's very cool.
So we learned a lot, and those stations would have local bands on too, and they would have a couple live shows where bands could go, and if you're lucky enough to get booked there, and do a live set or something sometimes.
I miss that. I miss that kind. I mean, I know college radios kind of exist, but hearing that stuff of the '80s, I mean, that was kind of smack dab. That was that prime time for that. And I always think it's really cool to kind of hear about that kind of era. With
it was fun.
With getting back into with that local scene there too, because I feel like it depends where you're at in cities. Like around there, did you have to kind of get within the city to kind of if you wanted to be a part of the local music scene? I guess what I'm saying is, did it trickle down to the suburbs, or if you wanted local live music, or if you're in a band and you want to go play out, you had to get into the city, or did that kind of go to the outskirts?
There were some clubs on the outskirts, maybe a little bit, but more like the immediate suburbs. You could live in a suburb and drive to the city to go to the shows, of course. But that year, as soon as I graduated, almost the next week, I moved to Cleveland. I found an efficiency apartment and I just wanted to be there in the middle of everything. Because I was going to go to Cleveland State that fall, and I did. But I really didn't give it much time at all. I just kind of made a beeline, moved right out.
How did the scene? Because I mean, you were also quite a part of the Cleveland scene, in the '90s as well. I mean, how similar was that as we're talking a local scene in the mid '80s? I mean, did it stay in the '90s? Was it vastly different? Was it about the same? I mean, did you see a big shift from starting in the mid '80s or the '80s and then into the '90s? I mean, was there a big shift in things, or to kind of stay consistent?
Sort of a shift. Clubs tend to come and go sometimes. Some last forever. It depends on what club it was. But in the '90s in Cleveland, you had then emerging around '93 was the Grog Shop, which is still there now.
I love the Grog Shop.
Kathy had the first location on Coventry. I can't remember what year. There's articles that say that, but sometime around 92, 93, maybe 94. Forgive me if I'm wrong, Clevelanders, but something like that. And also a place that had always been a club on the campus of Case Western was Euclid Tavern. It'd always been a club. It had a lot of blues bands, Mr. Stress, some cover bands, this and that. And Derek Hess, now a famous show poster artist, started booking Euclid Tavern, and he booked a lot of underground things, and a lot of punk things, a lot of sort of indie rock things. He was fond of bands on the label Amphetamine Reptile. They would always come through town. I started having a band called Gem in the early 90s that started playing there a lot. Euclid Tavern was the first place that Guided by Voices played.
Oh, nice.
And that was probably around 93, I think. Gem, it could have been 94. I can't remember. I think it was 93. Gem opened up one show. Cobra Verde opened up maybe the first show they played. I think Cobra Verde opened up. So I was in two bands that opened up for them.
Nice.
I got to know them at the time. But the more the indie scene started happening in the 90s, as you know. And in the 80s, it was called underground. There were hardcore bands. There was that circuit. There was more commercial, sort of new wavy stuff. Americana as well. But then in the 90s, you just had more of that, plus indie rock became a I don't know, I don't want to say the word lifestyle, as opposed to the status of your label affiliation. indie versus major. But so that kind of changed things. Yeah.
It's interesting just to hear kind of about. I like hearing how kind of scenes kind of ebb and flow. And also that too, even with like the naming of things, where it's like, things weren't always like alternative or different tags like that, how things aren't called that on day one. It's interesting to even hear that, how things kind of get rebranded or renamed over the years.
More towards the mid 90s too. There was another place called Speak in Tongues that was very DIY, and they had bands on a very underground circuit, indie circuit that would come through. I mean, they had some more commercial things that played there too, but that was a cool place to go. For a while, Gem had a rehearsal space in the back of it. So there were more places emerged.
It sounds like it was almost easier to be in a band. Not maybe easier is not the right word, but it sounds like in the 90s it was probably like, I don't know, easier, I guess is what I'll use to like go play places and find band stuff to play with. It sounds like it was even more, the local scene sounds even more fruitful than it did in the 80s, I'll say.
I think as all time has gone on, it's been easier to be in a band and play places compared to what went before.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense. I'm sure even touring nowadays versus touring in the 90s versus touring in the 80s, you got something different for each one. Totally different experiences.
Yeah.
But with you, I kind of wanted to, I think, like, looking back at Children's Crusade, when you listen and, you know, you're now removed, do you like guitar playing wise, do you hear yourself in there? Do you hear Doug Gillard in the guitar playing? Or when you listen back to this, does it sound like someone totally different to you? Does it sound like you're listening to a totally different player?
I guess it's about the same. And I was surprised by how sort of, I didn't really learn much more after that. Listening to playing, I thought, well, I kind of can't get much better than this. I was already kind of formed by that point. And I mean, there was some, you know, my timing got better. So, you know, my timekeeping skills got better, and economy of writing as far as meaning, you don't have to play 8 patterns as an intro. Got a little better as time went on. But other than that, as far as technical ability, it was pretty much there by that time, I guess. I don't know. So I was kind of surprised to learn that, you know, when you get into the tracks and really listening to the stuff.
I know it was one of many bands that you kind of did at that time, but like, do you feel like you picked up anything during doing Children's Crusade where you can kind of go, I don't know, I learned this while writing for that band or playing in that band? I mean, is there anything you think you picked up during that time, or not really?
Well, yeah, probably. That was the first time I really did multi-track playing of all the stuff to myself, to a guitar track. And when we got in, listened to the multi-tracks, one track was a click track. In 83, that would have been late 83, we probably recorded it. I'm not really sure. It could have been early 84. There was I think I tracked the rhythm guitar there was a sort of a beeping click track on it, metronome. So those existed then. And I just kind of built, you know, played bass and then played drums over that, blah, blah, blah. But that was the first time I'd really done that in a professional manner. I'd done some home stuff before, but nothing that got released. So I learned sort of how to play to myself, and I would do that later with projects that Bob Pollard would do, and what have you. But so, you know, I guess I learned how to do that. I didn't really learn about engineering and working a board. I did it. I technically worked that board, not very well. I didn't know anything. I didn't know shit. But luckily, there was an engineer running the studio that didn't let me go too far astray there, to where the stuff sounds kind of normal. I have one cassette where he let me kind of mess around with the EQs and mix stuff as a rough mix to take home. You can hear the messing around with the EQs and the things getting too loud and blah, blah, blah on the cassette. I mean, that stuff is very unusable, but it points out to me how little I knew about anything. But
yeah,
it was fun. It was a weird format though too, because you had 2 reel-to-reel tapes, 2 I think 1/2-inch 8-track tapes, machines synced up through a device in the middle, a syncing device. And I don't know if it was Simply Stripe or not on the tapes, syncing them, but so when Travis Harrison and I got into remix this stuff, we found a little bit of drift. I mean, number one, they're 40-year-old tapes. Number two, they had to be baked so that the tapes would even play on tape players. I took it to a guy named Steve Rosenthal, who used to own the Magic Shop recording studio in New York. He runs an archival service, restoration service. And he handles everything. He handles all sorts of things. I can't even begin to say. I saw Debbie Harry solo records in there. There was lots of Matador masters in there. There was some Pixies live thing. There was all this stuff in all formats. So they can bake the tapes. They can restore them. He transfers them to digital. So what Travis and I found, that there was a little drift between the sets of reels. The drums are on reel 2. So by drift, I mean speed-wise. It would get a little faster. So because you're dealing with 2 different tape players, one will play maybe a little faster than the other ones. And the syncing device kind of makes them come together, regulates the speed of them. So we got lucky in that we didn't have to do too much adjustment. We had to nudge some things a little bit rhythm-wise, but not too much in Pro Tools. So it was interesting.
It's cool to go back and like revise these things. The things like you were saying, you kind of got to go into, this is your first time basically being an engineer for, an album. But now 40 years later, you get to kind of, go back and fix things you may, for the most part, fix things you would like to fix.
I never really thought it'd be possible to get into this stuff. I've always wanted to be able to remix this Children's Crusade stuff so you could really hear everything. And it was always sort of daunting to me to think about it, even though I knew I had the tapes. All it took was for me to look up how to, who to go to and really just get it done. So
I'm happy you finally did it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, me too.
Well, just a couple more here for you, and
sure.
We'll let you go. But I did want to ask about this. Kind of get back into your guitar playing. When you first stepped into Guided by Voices, like, what was your approach when you're going into a band that's obviously established and you're replacing another guitarist? Do you feel like you went in with the approach of, you're trying to build what was already there? There was a foundation and you want to kind of stay somewhat informed there? Or did you go in kind of more of, I'm going to inject myself in this band and what I do and my style? Like, because I think that's interesting. It's one thing to be obviously the guitar player of a band when you start it, but once there's a band already with some records under their belt and, somewhat of a sound already established, for your role as guitarist, how did you kind of handle that in the very beginning?
That's a great question, because it's interesting in that we came in to Guided by Voices as Cobra Verde, an intact band already. And since I was with those guys, at first we played how we played at the time. And I also wanted to be reverent enough of the Guided by Voices sound up to that point. so I kind of straddled the two things. And looking back, well, let me say that as time went on, I consciously sort of steered it more towards being a little more reverent, and playing less and trying not to overplay. It took some years to do that, but because on autopilot, I tend to just play a lot. And but I've always loved the song, the concept of the song. So I want to be true to the song and not do too much, and just really get into the chords and just the way it goes, and serve the song, as they say. So as time went on, I sort of got to a spot where I was comfortable doing that, serving the song, as well as if Bob wanted to lead, which he did, he wanted solos and stuff sometimes, that I would do that as well. But I'm always thinking of little hooks and little licks to put here and there, guitar wise. So I would say at first, in retrospect, I think I did overplay a lot. I guess not too much, but since it was so different, though, to the way the Guided by Voices was perceived up to that point. And we were just different players, than those guys. That's actually what Bob wanted too. I mean, he wanted that. So he didn't want us to try to sound like the other guys, but when it comes to playing the records, the classic songs, and especially now, I try to be super reverent live when we do them live. The songs that were made up until 96. I don't know. I just try to be as true as I can to those versions.
You do a very good job. I've only ever seen Guided by Voices with you in the band, and I mean, all the old songs still work.
Oh,
everything you're playing on, there's something off. It always works really well.
Well, thanks. Well, I mean, like I said, we came to know those guys. We did a tour with them in '94. We've opened up for them a few times before that in the '90s. So we knew not only Bob, but we knew Mitch Tobin and Kevin Fennell and Greg Demos. And so they were friends. And, we also had a lot of respect for them. So there wasn't an attitude of swashbuckling coming in and, just kind of, scorched earth or whatever. But, if Bob wanted something, if he said during a song, yeah, I want to lead here, I want to solo, do something fancy, then I would definitely do that, and try to achieve his vision of a song. So,
well, kind of going off of that with, I mean, your approach when you joined Guided by Voices, how does that compare to like when you joined Not a Surf? How do you feel like your role in that was? You know what I mean? Do you feel like it was pretty similar to yours in joining with Guided by Voices, or was that different for you at all?
No, I think it was different. I think it's very different. My joining Not a Surf freed up Matthew to be more of a sort of a front man and singer, vocalist, as he always was, but not have to worry so much about his guitar, holding down the guitar playing. I mean, I would learn his basic parts, although I'm talking in a live setting. Although he would still play his basic parts, and I would sort of just embellish a little bit, and it was more just an additive. I was sort of a nice addition, I guess, to their sound. Maybe beefed it up a little bit at the time. I'm not sure. But I was involved in 2 or 3 records, two records at least from the ground up, 2 albums with them with new songs, and so that was great. That was really fun and really great music, and it was just a different creative process, but it's all love, it's all good.
Nice. Well, we have the new Children's Crusade reissue coming. What else for the rest of I mean, we got like, I don't know, I guess as I'm talking to you, we got like 2.5 months or so left of the year. Anything else from you? I mean, Guided by Voices, anything else in the world of Doug Gillard coming up the rest of the year that people should know about?
Well, Guided by Voices has a couple more shows. And when is this going out?
This will be out like a week before the release. So like, it'd be,
okay.
Sorry, I'm looking at a calendar, like November 11th, I think, if I'm doing my math right.
All right. Well, so I won't talk about the Guided by Voices live shows in Texas. That's in late October. So those will have happened. And we'll have gone down a treat, as they say. But the rest of the year, I can't say release-wise if there's anything more happening, but I know in February there's a new Guided by Voices record that's been in the can.
Nice.
Coming out. I think it's in February. If not, it's early in the year. So that's been done for a bit, but it's really great. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Not really, but I guess I'm looking forward to this Children's Crusade. It's going to be on vinyl, CD, and digital. So,
nice. You have some choices there.
Yeah, at rockathonrecords.com. And it's on Splendid Research. That's Robert Pollard's new sort of side project label. And after that, just to plug that label a little more.
Absolutely.
He has something coming down the pike by the Moles, which is it's Richard Davies.
Oh.
Who's in Cardinal. And also he's known for the Moles past output and his own solo thing. So Richard Davies, a New Zealander / Australian living in Connecticut now. So I could be completely wrong on his origin. I think I want to say New Zealand, but he's a great guy, and the Moles are a great band. It's great stuff. So that's new release by the Moles is going to be out on Splendid Research early into the next year, I think.
Yeah, because this Children's Crusade is only like his second release on the label.
Yeah,
I was going to say that's like this is a very new label, so that's really cool. That's cool. We got the reissue. The live shows will be done, which I do have to ask you, last one, because I talked to bands about this with like set list making and how I'm sure it gets harder the more and more records you have. But I mean, I'm talking to someone who's in Guided by Voices. So, I mean, even more so, I mean, is that a daunting, I don't know if you're part of the set list making, but is that a daunting task? Because if there's any band I can think of that I think I'd get anxiety trying to write a set list for and trying to think of everything to go through, it's probably Guided by Voices. Yeah.
Well, I'm not part of the what goes into the set list, but I have to make a new one every night because the order changes every night. So we get our markers out and sheets of 11 by 17 paper and write all songs on the set list. But we work from we know what the batch is, and we add in new things gradually. So it's not as hard. It's not as difficult as some might think. It's more difficult when there's a new record and let's say you're putting in 6. You have to learn maybe 6 new songs in the new record, as opposed to just a couple. But that's even kind of rare. We've been adding them in 2 at a time or something sometimes. So, and if there's an old chestnut that we're putting back in, chances are I already know them or have played them before. So that's not too hard to go back and sort of learn crib a little bit and get familiar with. So it's really not that bad. The songs that have been in the list have been in for a while, and when those records came out in the past, we put them in then, and they just kind of stayed in. So a lot of it is muscle memory, So even though there are 50 something songs, all you need to do is just kind of brush up at home a little bit.
Makes it easy.
Go through it a couple times. Sometimes we'll get together as a band before a tour weekend. Especially if there's a couple new things, but anymore we just kind of go through things at sound check and kind of get them down. So
wow, no,
that's a good system going.
Yeah, the first time I saw you guys, I think you played almost 3 hours in 2018 in Minneapolis. It was like the day before New Year's Eve. It was like December 30th, 2018. And yeah, I think you guys played a good 3 hours. It might have been more. I forget how many songs are on that set list. But again, like when I think of set list making, I think of Guided by Voices.
Yeah.
But
well,
I mean,
it's not as hard for the musicians as well. It is. I was going to say as it is for Bob, but it doesn't seem to be that difficult for him to remember all the lyrics, and I don't know why that is.
It blows my mind every time I see you guys. The whole time, the energy
that's
never.
A gift that he has. He never uses any cheat sheets or anything like ever. So,
jeez.
I think he rehearses a lot at home, but even if he doesn't, he has a capacity to remember lyrics, and so.
The last time I saw you guys was in Buffalo last year, and I think it was the first time you guys had played together, and I don't remember how long. It was like your first show back, I think. You didn't miss a beat. The whole thing, like, I don't remember it. Everyone was on fire. Everything sounded great. There was no, like, if you wouldn't have mentioned it had been so long, it doesn't sound like there had been a big old lapse in time. So kudos to you guys.
Oh, thank you very much.
But as we close this out, I mean, you want to tell people, I mean, you kind of already mentioned it, but where to grab the Children's Crusade reissue. If you're online anywhere, if you want to tell people where to find you online, find the music, any plugs, if you'd like to promote anything, this is the time to plug away.
Okay, well, Children's Crusade at rockathonrecords.com. You can go on any Guided by Voices site, guidedbyvoices.gbv.com. There's some Facebook pages, I guess, dedicated to the band. That sounds lame to say. Of course there are. But just look up Children's Crusade, and you can find those links. My main thing, as far as my solo stuff, would be bandcamp.com. My name, Doug Gillard at Bandcamp. You can find that stuff there. Guided by Voices tour dates are on guidedbyvoices.com. And what am I missing? Anything?
I think you got them all. Okay. I can't think of much else. Google Doug Gillard. If not, Google Doug Gillard. See what comes up. See if you can find links there. You'll find them there. I mean, anything else as we close this out? Did we miss anything? Anything else to let the good people know before we close this one out?
This is an 8-song record, and it's over within 27 minutes. 28 minutes.
This interview about that release was double the amount.
Yeah,
longer.
So there's 4 songs aside. It was a cassette. It was a short cassette when I released it, but it should be a fun listen. So
if they're listening,
there's a inner sleeve with all the lyrics on it and some archival pictures and of us and things like that. So
I'm very excited to get my hands on one. And again, if people are listening, that's coming out November 15th. So either it's out now if you're listening a couple days later, or it's going to be out very soon. So make sure you grab that Children's Crusade, A Duty Dance with Death. And well, Doug, this was great. I'm Anthony Merchant talking to Doug Gillard right here on the Power Chord Hour.
Thank you.